Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hope Hospice's Family Caregiver Education Series. I'm Debbie Emerson, Hope's Community Health Educator and Certified Dementia Specialist. I've been with Hope since 2014 as the facilitator of our Family Caregiver Program. And in addition to my 30 years plus experience as a health educator, I have many years of experience as a family caregiver for loved ones who have had dementia. So my goal today is to share information with you that's based on both my professional training and on my personal experiences. And my co-presenter for today is Gia Barcel.
Thank you, Debbie. I am Hope Hospice's Manager of Dementia Services and Community Education. I am TIPA Snow certified. I'm a dementia consultant and trainer, and I look forward to talking with you today about the importance of self-care. I hope your takeaway after today is number one, that you're not alone. And number two, that you know that there is help out there. Our topics for today include looking at change, trying to understand the causes of burnout, some suggestions for coping, and examining our emotions surrounding the caregiving experience. We'll end on a positive note as we look at the rewards of caregiving. And really, rewards do exist.
Okay, I'd like to start today by sharing a quote. Life is not the way it's supposed to be, it's the way it is. The way that you cope with it is what makes the difference. The way in which we respond will direct and influence the event more than the event itself. And this is our theme for today, exploring how we cope with challenges and remembering that our response to those challenges makes all the difference between thriving and crashing and burning. So rather than just giving you lists of things to do to make you feel better, our focus for today will be more on helping you to understand why caregiving is so stressful, especially for those of you who are caring for one with dementia. And we're hoping that by understanding the causes, you'll gain some insight that can help you to better deal with the situation, and maybe even help you avoid burnout. And another quick note before we get started. I recently read an article on TIPA Snow's website. And as you may know, TIPA Snow is one of the leading experts in dementia care. And the article was titled Loved One, Maybe, Maybe Not. And it touched on a topic that we've addressed many times in our classes. Sometimes the term loved one is used as kind of a catch-all, like a catch-all phrase when referring to the persons who are receiving care from a family member. And we've certainly used it many, if in not all of our presentations over the years. But I always thought it was a bit disingenuous because really, sometimes when we're providing care, we may not be feeling the love. And not all of us provide care for someone we love, even though it may indeed be a family member. Now, at one of my family caregiver support groups, I brought up this topic just to kind of get an idea of how the members felt about using the term loved one. It led to a really interesting discussion and provided a safe environment for our members to talk openly about their feelings regarding the person for whom they were providing care. Many admitting that sometimes the caregiving situation was so overwhelming that at times they really didn't like this person and kind of hated the entire situation. This is completely normal and completely understandable. Caregiving is hard and it takes such a toll on us. So our dilemma is, how do we refer to your care recipients when we're talking about them in our presentations? Care recipient is pretty generic and it doesn't really evoke any emotions. So we like that, even though it's a bit clinical. So today we thought we would just cover all the bases and use the terms loved one, care recipient, the person for whom you're providing care, all interchangeably. And you can interpret that however you would like. And I have the article I just mentioned listed on your reference list. It's a real interesting one, and I hope you'll take a look.
One of the challenges of dementia care education is that each of your journeys is unique, and the timeline for the progression of dementia varies much from individual to individual. If today's audience is like most who've attended Hope Hospice's webinars, we will most likely have care partners with care recipients in varying stages of dementia, from very early mild cognitive impairment to very late or end stages. Or maybe some of you are here to get a better sense of how to handle a future dementia diagnosis. And even if dementia is not a part of your caregiving experience, the information we'll be sharing here today is relevant to all caregiving situations. So even though the underlying condition that's causing the dementia can influence the symptoms and the progression, all dementias have much in common. Regardless of the current situation, the dementia will progress, in most cases, to the point where the person needs round-the-clock care. What can be confusing and challenging is that the person with dementia will have moments, maybe even hours, where they're lucid. They may even seem to be just like their former selves. They'll have good days and not so good days. The sad reality is that dementia is a condition that is chronic and will get progressively more disabling. As more and more abilities are lost, the caregiver's role will evolve and responsibilities will increase, in some cases quite dramatically. The time will inevitably come where one person cannot provide all of the care all of the time. It's essential that you ask for help from relatives, friends, professional in-home care providers, and maybe even consider facility placement should your care recipient's needs become more than you can handle. It's so important for your own as well as their well-being that they view you first as their spouse, son, daughter, grandchild, rather than just someone who takes care of their physical needs. With increased caregiver responsibilities, it's only natural that the caregiver's stress level increases. A person with dementia may also experience an increase in stress and frustration as more and more abilities are lost. So we need to be aware of this and make sure that we do everything possible to focus on providing support and creating a meaningful life for both the caregiver and the person living with dementia. If you've viewed our webinars or taken our classes, you know that one of our best resources is Teepa Snow, a nationally renowned dementia educator. In this short video clip, Teepa shares with us some wise thoughts on being a dementia care partner. So let's listen.
Hi, I'm Teepa Snow. I'm a dementia care consultant and a trainer. I have over 30 plus years as an occupational therapist. My goal, my purpose is to help people who are trying to care for somebody who has dementia. Dementia's tough. You need to learn more about it and learn what it does and what it doesn't do and what it's going to mean for you. 4 out of 5 families will fall apart because this is a challenge and only 1 out of 5 will pull together. And it's mostly because everything changes when you have dementia. It's not just about memory and it's not just about one thing and it's not stable and it's not static. And once it happens, it hasn't happened. And so you're done. It keeps changing. Now, what that means, if you're smart and if you're wise, you start from the very beginning realizing this is a journey. You're going to be on a journey. And when you start a journey, if you're thinking it's just going to be a little short one, a little sprint, well, you don't plan very well. Try not to do the Lone Ranger thing, go off on your own and just do the best you can, because before this is over, you're going to be out of juice. You're going to be out of gas. And there are things that are available, but you need to know that before you need them, because when you need them, you don't have the energy or the will or the ability even at that point to go out and get them. I also would tell you there's lots of skills you're going to need. It's more than just who you know, it's what you know, and how you do what you do becomes incredibly important. And nobody is necessarily born with these talents, and you don't even get that information when you get the diagnosis. So you want to find out what's out there, because what's out there makes a difference. I would say one of the most important things to do as a caregiver is to quit being a caregiver and become a care partner. Quit assuming that the person you're trying to help is going to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the more you try to push your help at them, the more they're going to push back. And it's important to go, oh, well, this isn't working, and recognize, let me think of something else. Or if I can't think of something else, let me go and find out something else. So my message to you, there are things out there. Find out what your resources are and where to go get them. You don't have to go somewhere physically, but you do have to go somewhere mentally. You have to be willing to make a trip. And that means stop, pause. And here's the most important skill I can give you in the short range. Learn the art of letting it go. You can hold it all in. It won't change anything. Learn to breathe, take a moment, and learn.
So if today's audience is like most who have attended Hope Hospice's webinars, will most likely have care partners with care recipients in varying stages of dementia, from very early mild cognitive impairment to very late or end stages. Or maybe some of you are here to get a better sense of how to handle a future dementia diagnosis. Like we spoke about earlier, even if dementia is not a part of your caregiving experience, the information we'll be sharing today is relevant to all caregiving situations. Research tells us that caring for a person with dementia is the most stressful of all caregiving experiences. So let's take a look at some of the possible reasons. As I'm elaborating, see if you can relate to any of these, and also try to find a common thread throughout the reasons. First of all, dementia by nature is unpredictable, and there is always uncertainty about what the future may hold. Not knowing what to expect can be debilitating for all involved. When the person with dementia has a moment of lucidity, where they make complete sense or act like their former selves, we get a false sense of hope that maybe they've reached a plateau or maybe they're getting better. Dementia changes a person's personality, and it's only natural to expect them to be who we always knew them to be. When they change, it's hard to accept. Dementia often causes relationships to change. Suddenly, you aren't the spouse or the adult child anymore. You're now the caregiver, and you're telling them what to do. This role confusion is hard on everyone. When the relationship changes, we naturally begin to grieve what once was. We mourn the loss of that relationship. It can be challenging to work with your family members who have different perceptions about what is happening or the need for care. Family dynamics can be complicated under the best of circumstances. Add in dementia, and the challenges multiply exponentially. Dementia-related behaviors, such as wandering, agitation, aggressive behaviors, repetitive behaviors, can all be incredibly frustrating and challenging to deal with. Caregiving for a person living with dementia is a 24/7 job, even with help. We worry even when we're not around the care recipient. I found that I was always on high alert, just waiting for the next problem to surface. Researchers have found that a person who provides care for someone with dementia is twice as likely to suffer from depression as a person providing care for someone without dementia. Not only do caregivers spend significantly more hours per week providing care, they report more employment problems, personal stress, mental and physical health problems, and more family conflict than the non-dementia caregivers. So, did you notice what all of these reasons have in common? Change.
So remember, dementia changes everything. First of all, change and stress go hand in hand. And it doesn't matter if it's positive change, such as getting an exciting new job or having a new baby or a grandbaby, getting married, even winning the lottery, or change caused by something unpleasant. Because change involves not just a beginning of something, but also an ending of what was. And there's always a certain amount of loss associated with change. And as humans, it's natural for us to grieve those losses. But you need to remember that whatever the change or how out of control things might seem, we always have a choice. We may not love all the options, but in every situation in life, we always do have options. So with regard to change, what are our choices? So you can always choose whether or not to deal with the change. Now, denial is a popular coping mechanism, not a healthy one, but for a lot of us, denial is a default reaction. You can choose how you deal with the change. Many of us fight change and desperately try to cling to how things used to be. Now, what's your attitude about the situation? Are you going to view it as, well, this is awful, I hate it, and sink into the depths of despair? Or are you going to look at the situation as a challenge, an opportunity to be creative and resourceful? Now, one of the things that I kept repeating to myself during the pandemic, the last few years, was with crisis comes opportunity. And I was always trying to figure out, how can I use this awfulness to learn and grow and be better? And lastly, are you going to accept the change by looking ahead and planning for the what ifs? Or are you going to wait for a crisis to make decisions for you? By the way, the vast majority of caregivers wait for the crisis to spur them into action. And the big problem here is that when we make decisions in a crisis situation, we greatly reduce our options. So caregivers who deny change or try to maintain the status quo, those who try to cling to the way things were in the past, are actually wasting time and energy trying to keep things the same. It's futile because things aren't the same, no matter how much we wish they were. We may lose opportunities for the care recipient to take part in planning for his or her future. And this is especially important in the early stages of dementia, when the person still is able to make some decisions and share their wishes. If the caregiver is clinging to the way things used to be, in other words, they're denying that dementia diagnosis, sometimes they avoid talking about important issues with their loved one until it's too late, until their loved one is no longer capable of making sound decisions. And when we cling to the way that things used to be, we develop unrealistic expectations, because it's hard to accept that our loved one is declining. And it is natural for us to keep encouraging the person to just try harder. But it's not a function of their not trying. It's a function of the fact that abilities are being lost. And the more that the person struggles to try, just to please us in many cases, the worse things become. Remember that old saying, the only constant is change? We have to learn to live with it and use change as a chance to learn and grow and maybe even improve. So there are many studies that support the fact that the stresses and strains of caregiving can lead to serious physical and mental issues. The combination of loss, prolonged stress, the physical demands of caregiving, and the biological vulnerabilities that come with aging, place you at risk for significant health problems as well as an earlier death. Studies also show that caregivers are less likely than non-caregivers to practice preventative health care and self-care. So what does this look like? Now, most of you probably know the definition and symptoms of burnout, but it's important to review the symptoms. So the physical symptoms that we have listed here are the result of a heightened stress response, the fight or flight response. Now, when we're exposed to stressors, our body is in a constant state of readiness for action. Now, when there's a physical reason for that stress response, these physiological changes are really helpful because they enable us to survive, to run, or to fight. But when what's triggering the activation of that sympathetic nervous system is psychological, the body still responds in a physical way. And since we're not performing a physical function, running, fighting, screaming, we don't release this buildup of energy. So it remains in our system and it can slowly cause damage. And we may experience many, if not all, of the physical symptoms that are listed here. But burnout doesn't just have physical symptoms. The emotional manifestations are just as debilitating and dangerous. So as you skim through these lists, ask yourself if you're experiencing any of them now. And I think Gia's got a little quiz coming up just to kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. So, how do you know if you're experiencing caregiver burnout? Well, let's take a look at this list. And as you look through it, count up how many apply to you. The first one, you no longer find pleasure in things you once found enjoyable. 2, friends and family have expressed concerns about your well-being. 3, you're getting negative feedback at work. 4, you're having problems with your spouse. 5, you experience intense and recurrent feelings of anger, sadness, worry, or fear. 6, you have difficulty concentrating. 7, you have trouble sleeping, drastic weight changes, or other unexplained health problems. And 8, you use a substance to cope with, manage, or suppress painful feelings. Now, if you were able to check 2 or more, there's a good chance you're already burned out.
So what do we do about this? I always think that the first step in solving a problem is to acknowledge that there is a problem. And then the next step is trying to figure out what's caused it. And I think that it's only then that we can begin to look for solutions. Otherwise, we're just putting on Band-Aids, the temporary fixes. So typically, caregiver burnout is caused by one or more of these: role confusion, unrealistic expectations and demands, lack of control, priority paralysis, and family conflicts. And the big one, too much stress and too few rewards. And we're going to talk about each of these in greater detail, starting with role confusion. It can be difficult for a person to separate their role as a caregiver from their role as a spouse, an adult child, a friend, whatever. And the longer we provide care, the more difficult it is. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling the way I did when I was caring for my mom. I felt a very definite role reversal where I was the one doing the parenting. Now, I didn't like that, nor did my mom, although she was very grateful for the attention I was giving her. Even if you're providing care for a spouse with dementia, it's pretty easy to slip into that parenting role. And this isn't good for either of you. And it actually contributes to the decline of your relationship. So there's a couple of things that can be done to minimize this role confusion. So the first one, we can practice what's called both and thinking. Now, many of us have a tendency to think in extremes, the either ors, the black or whites. But both and thinking is the opposite of either or. In other words, both and gives us the opportunity to have our cake and eat it too, because we don't have to make a choice. So some examples would be, I am both a care partner and a person with my own needs. I don't have to give up things I enjoy because I'm taking care of someone else. I can find time, make time to take care of me too, because I take care of both him and myself. So as care partners, we do make sacrifices, right? And that can lead to resentment and anger and sadness. but that doesn't mean that those emotions can rule our lives. So let's put that into the both and perspective with another example. I am both sad about things I've had to give up and happy that I have a new grandbaby on the way or a fun trip planned. By the way, it's important to have something to look forward to. Or what about, and this is a tough one, I both wish it was over and that my loved one could keep on living. I hope that both and thinking makes sense to you. Sometimes it's easy to get wrapped up in the caregiver role. So make time in the day to focus on your relationship with your spouse, your parent, whomever you're providing care for. Find things to do together that you did prior to dementia or their illness. Schedule time for that in every day's agenda. And this is so important for both you and the one for whom you're providing care. And the best way to give yourself time to focus on your relationship is to delegate some of your caregiving responsibilities to other family members, to willing friends, or even if you can, hire some in-home care providers. Because you still need to maintain your identity as a wife, as a husband, as a son, daughter, whatever. It's hard to do that when you're tending to your loved one's personal hygiene needs. So ask for help.
If you're like many of us, you may have a tendency to place unrealistic expectations and demands on yourself, other family members, and the one for whom you're providing care. Many caregivers think that they're the only person who can do it all. They may think that they're the only person their loved one trusts, or maybe they don't think anyone else can do the job as well as they can. One person doing it all is not only unrealistic, but it can end up being unhealthy for everyone involved. We may expect others, especially family members, to step up and do their part. And we can't understand why family members are unwilling to help us. We may not take into account that everyone reacts to dementia in different ways. Denial, discomfort, withdrawal. We may expect others will demonstrate the same type of commitment that we have. And these expectations may lead us to judge, and judging destroys relationships. If you establish yourself as the primary caregiver, your family may come to expect either you can or you want to do it all. Early in the process, be sure that family members know that this is a team event and you welcome their help and their support. Getting others involved in care early on helps the care recipient to understand from the beginning that there are others who can help to meet his or her needs. It's really difficult to acknowledge that a once competent individual now requires help with basic tasks and skills. We expect that they should be able to do the things they used to do. And it's hard not to feel frustrated and impatient. Imagine their frustration, sadness, and anger over the loss of their abilities too. Dementia is a family disease and it's tough on everyone. Remember, the person living with dementia is doing the best they can, and so are you. Also, it's important to set boundaries and practice saying no when you can. You don't owe anyone a reason or an excuse. Your priorities are your self-care and the care of your loved one. And it's very important to practice saying yes when others offer to help you.
Okay, the next one is lack of control. And lack of control is always really a big one for me as a control freak. The caregiving situation itself is so unpredictable. We feel as if everybody and everything else is controlling us, like we're at their mercy. We try to make plans and then something happens and things change. Remember, we talked about change a few slides back. It can be debilitating. I talked about how unpredictable dementia is. We never know what to expect from our care recipients' behavior. One day or even 1 hour, our loved one is making perfect sense, but the next moment, all of that can change. You only have limited control over their behaviors and their actions. Now, many caregivers become frustrated by a lack of resources and skills to effectively plan, manage, and organize all of their loved ones' care. And when we're talking resources, we're looking at financial. Long-term care is ridiculously expensive. Not having enough help falls into the lack of resources category. And so does lack of time and lack of support, whether it's perceived or otherwise. Do you sometimes feel as if you don't have the proper training and skills to do everything you're expected to do as a caregiver? I mean, I know I felt that way years back when I cared for my mom. As far as I know, there's really not much in our public educational or experiential backgrounds that prepares us to be care providers. Do they teach this in high school or college? I know they didn't in mine. Some of us are fortunate in that we watched our parents provide care to their parents or spouses. Otherwise, we're playing it by ear and learning as we go. I know that's where I was 10 or 12 years ago. Knowledge is power. And I suspect that that's why you're here today. You're taking a step forward in gaining some control over what often feels like an uncontrollable situation. The next one is priority paralysis. Now, I don't know if this is a real term or if it's something that I made up. Regardless of what you call it, the phenomenon is real. Priority paralysis is when you have so much to do and you're feeling so overwhelmed that you are not motivated to do anything. You become paralyzed, curled up on the couch, walking around in circles, frozen in bed watching dumb TV shows. Do you know what I'm talking about here? So how do you break yourself free from this priority paralysis? First of all, realize that caregivers always will have more to do than the time to do it. Just accept that because you can't change it. So be realistic. Remember, we just talked about unreasonable demands, unreasonable expectations, and lack of control. There will never be enough time to do everything you need to do. And that's okay, because there's always tomorrow. We as humans are not perfect. Some of us don't even try things because we're afraid of not doing them well. Kind of a why bother attitude. If that's you, you need to let that go and accept that everything about caregiving is trial and lots of errors. So the best strategy for breaking out of priority paralysis is to just do something, anything. It doesn't have to be the most important thing on your list or even on your list. Anything is better than just sitting there ruminating about how overwhelmed you are.
Family dynamics are challenging under the best of circumstances. Throw a dementia diagnosis into the mix, and chaos may ensue. I'll read a quote from the AARP article, and by the way, it's in your resource list, that I like. Lone caregivers without family support may be at high risk for burnout. The more relatives who are involved in caregiving, though, the greater the likelihood of conflicts and power struggles. These family members may roughly jostle with one another for control over decision-making, thereby damaging their relationships for years to come. But it's the care recipient who suffers the most, feeling distressed and guilty that tasks relating to his or her health have resulted in skirmishes among loved ones. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Doing everything yourself leads to burnout, but having family involved adds another layer of challenges. As the primary caregiver, you've got to find a way to balance this situation. It's only natural for your family members to have different expectations, different levels of understanding, and different relationships with the care recipient. On top of this, everyone brings baggage from their childhood to the table. These elements may create emotionally charged situations. And emotionally charged situations are usually not conducive to cooperation. Another factor that can complicate the caregiving situation. These days, our families don't look like Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best. We have many more layers. We're actually more like the TV show Modern Family, because now families include step parents, perhaps multiple spouses, step and half siblings, and maybe even include ex-spouses. And all of them may have some skin in the game. According to Teepa Snow, 4 out of 5 families who are caring for one with dementia will fall apart, and only 1 out of 5 will pull together and actually come out of the experience as a stronger unit. So what are some ways to keep your family intact and functioning during and after the caregiving journey? Well, you'll have to make some commitments. Try to accept family members for who they are, not who you wish they were. And believe me, I know this is easier said than done, but you probably have a good sense of what your family members' strengths and weaknesses are, their capabilities. We talked earlier about having realistic expectations. Try to accept and respect differing perspectives and opinions. It's not realistic to expect that everyone will act, react, and respond the same way that you do. Another tip from that AARP article, a common rule used by high-functioning teams is that the member who offers ideas for doing things differently is required to create a coordinated action plan. This works really well for family members too. No one can phone in complaints without committing to do more themselves. And try to assess what kind of help you really want from your family members. As the team leader, try to be clear about what it is you need. Sometimes we can complain that everyone expects that I do it all, but people aren't mind readers. And if you want someone to help you, let them know exactly what they can do. Sometimes it may be as simple as having someone listen to you and provide emotional support. Sometimes you just want to feel appreciated. Being clear about your needs can help you from getting angry that others aren't supporting you in the way that you want. Remember, they can't support you the way that you want if you don't tell them what you want. And I know we all know that guilt trips are counterproductive. Ask in a way that isn't accusatory, but more, I'm struggling with finding the time to go grocery shopping while caring for mom. Could you either take my list and shop for me, or maybe could you spend an hour with mom while I go to the store? Providing options can help other family members feel less like you're bossing them around. The money aspect of things is tricky too. Try not to let conversations about financial issues and inheritance get in the way of the most important thing, helping your care recipient to feel loved and supported. And again, this is way easier said than done, but you may want to make this one of your top goals. And again, there are a couple of really good articles on the resource list that address this topic and many more. Making a commitment to communicate with everyone. Make sure roles and responsibilities are not only clear, but that everyone has agreed to their own responsibilities. If there's a family member who's particularly challenging, be aware of the potential to maybe alienate them, either inadvertently or intentionally. And excluding them or making them feel left out will come back to bite you in the end. In the same vein, don't withhold information. Everyone deserves to know everything that's going on. It can be extremely helpful to write everything down and make sure everyone has a copy of what gets discussed and is agreed upon. That way, there's a written reference available should it be needed. Regardless of how you feel about technology, it has in many cases been the only thing that's enabled us to stay connected and do our jobs in the last few years during the pandemic. And because it was a necessity, some people who you never would have expected could use technology are now pretty savvy and proficient at it. So there's really no excuse not to share information with family members who don't live nearby. And honestly, Zoom meetings are so much easier to schedule and attend rather than getting everyone together in person and struggling with scheduling those. Additionally, you can record them to share with those who may be unable to attend. It's so important for family members to share tips and strategies for what works well in interacting with the person who has dementia. With the goal of providing the best care, we want everyone to be successful. One of the easiest ways to manage family struggles is to always place your care recipients' needs as your top priority, and to know that you'll have to grin and bear it a lot, but in the end, it'll be worth it. And if your family situation is especially challenging, you may want to ask for help from someone who can be objective, such as a clergy member or a therapist. If your loved one happens to be on hospice, the hospice social worker can be an excellent mediator.
Okay, thank you, Gia. So I know it was true for me. It's true for so many people I talk with, and Gia has shared the same thing with me. Family dynamics, dealing with family members when you are the primary caregiver, is one of the most challenging parts of the whole caregiving experience. For that reason, Gia and I are in the process of putting together a new webinar that is all about family dynamics, with tips on how to handle all of the situations that arise. Because really, I mean, and think of it, those of you who are in attendance today, think about your own situation. Sometimes do you wish that even though you desperately want help from other family members, that, sometimes they probably should keep their opinions to themselves? Anyway, we'll be talking about that and a lot of other things in the new webinar that's going to come out next year.
So, what can you do to minimize burnout? Well, honestly, you've taken the very important first step. You are here. So pat yourself on the back. You're gaining understanding of some important things that will come up during this caregiving journey, and you're educating yourself. Not only will this step help to keep the burnout in check, but it will also be important for you to share this information that you learned today with your family so that you can make educated decisions together. And by the way, I'll throw out there that there are support groups out there that can help you to not feel quite so alone. And if you're interested in getting connected with one, just reach out, and either Debbie or myself can help you to try to find the resources for that. So we'll spend the rest of the presentation looking at some other things that will help. Forming a care team, changing the way you view the situation. Remember earlier we talked about how it's not the situation that causes distress, but how we handle it. Self-care, the care you give to yourself is the care you give to your loved one. And focusing on the rewards of caregiving.
Okay, so forming a care team. The first step in doing this is determining what type of help and support that you need. Actually, the first step is in recognizing that you can't do it alone. Remember that old adage, it takes a village. In the next slide, we'll take a closer look at a strategy for figuring out what kind of help you need. We just talked about the importance of working together with family members. In most cases, family will make up the lion's share of your care team, but oftentimes we rely on others to help out as well. Our friends, our trusted coworkers, and paid caregivers. So establish from the very beginning that everyone's help is necessary in order to best meet the needs of your care recipient and you. Now, we each have our own system of task management or our organizational style. So it's important to find a simple strategy or a tool that everyone feels comfortable with. Now, there's a lot of good web-based systems and apps out there, such as Caring Village, Care Zone. There's one called Lots of Helping Hands. But you have to be sure that everyone on the team is committed to using whatever system is needed.
So speaking of a team, forming a team is sometimes easier said than done. especially if you're one of those people who finds it easier to do things yourself rather than ask for help. You might be afraid someone will mess it up and then you'll just have to redo it. Sound familiar to some of you? Well, we can't be a good caregiver without a team to support us. And we can't tell our helpers what we need if we haven't taken the time to figure out what that is. It's helpful to start by writing down what you need. Think about what it is that you want others to know about your situation and how you're feeling. Share that with those you trust. It's okay to be vulnerable. Jot down the names of a couple of people you know that you can go to for a pep talk. Someone who won't judge you if you have a meltdown. Someone who won't try to fix things, but who will be there to just let you talk or cry or vent or whatever. Jot down the names of people you trust and that your loved one trusts to help with care, or who can stay with your loved one while you take a break. Who can you call at the last minute? Who can you count on to come through in a pinch should you need it? This may sound weird, but who can you make arrangements with in advance to ask for help at a moment's notice? So what do you need? Don't wait until a need or a crisis arises. Anticipate the areas in which you can ask others to help you. Here's a general list to help get you started. The list is up on your screen. I believe I can't see the screen, but I think it's up there. Debbie, can you confirm?
Yes, it's up there.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And don't be afraid to say yes when someone offers to help. Say yes at the moment a person offers to help rather than saying maybe or I'll let you know. Make a list of errands or tasks that you need help with. Keep in mind that people feel useful and gratified when they're able to help others. Ask your care recipient, and your care recipient will benefit greatly by getting accustomed to accepting help from others. It's also a great opportunity for them to have some socialization with someone other than you. Remember, as a caregiver, you're a team leader. You need to be prepared to manage and lead your team, and you need to learn to trust others.
Remember, when dealing with an uncontrollable situation, you do control one thing, and that is your response to that situation. And it's not the task that overwhelms, but how you, the caregiver, perceive the task. Just like the person for whom you're providing care, in particular if they have dementia, just like their perception is their reality, whether it be distorted or not, your perception is your reality. So are you looking at the situation in a negative doomsday perspective? Easy enough to do. But can you spin it to make it work for you rather than against you? So what do we mean by the term reframing? Have you ever noticed that a certain picture frame can change your perception of the picture that's inside it? The frame that you put around something sets the tone for what's inside. The picture or piece of art remains the same, but the frame around it can bring out different aspects, different colors, different feelings. So not only can we change the frames on pieces of art or photography, we can reframe situations, events, even roles. Because when we change the frame, our perceptions and our attitudes also change. So let's use stress as an example. Does the word stress have negative connotations for you? Well, of course it does. And we just spent some time talking about how burnout caused by unmanageable stress can kill you. So I always thought of stress as bad until I saw a talk by Dr. Kelly McGonigal, who's a health psychologist at Stanford. And she shows us how to put a different frame around stress, a positive one that can change the way we perceive it and actually make it work to our advantage.
I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me.
in the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone? How about a moderate amount of stress? Who's experienced a lot of stress? Yeah, me too. But that is not my confession. My confession is this: I am a health psychologist, and my mission is to help people be happier and healthier. But I fear that something I've been teaching for the last 10 years is doing more harm than good. And it has to do with stress. For years, I've been telling people stress makes you sick. It increases the risk of everything from the common cold to cardiovascular disease. Basically, I've turned stress into the enemy. But I've changed my mind about stress. And today, I want to change yours. Let me start with the study that made me rethink my whole approach to stress. This study tracked 30,000 adults in the United States for 8 years. And they started by asking people, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, do you believe that stress is harmful for your health? And then they used public death records to find out who died. Okay, some bad news first. People who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believed that stress is harmful for your health. People who experienced a lot of stress but did not view stress as harmful were no more likely to die. In fact, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study, including people who had relatively little stress. Now, the researchers estimated that over the 8 years they were tracking deaths, 182,000 Americans died prematurely, not from stress, but from the belief that stress is bad for you. That is over 20,000 deaths a year. Now, if that estimate is correct, that would make believing stress is bad for you the 15th largest cause of death in the United States last year, killing more people than skin cancer, HIV, AIDS, and homicide. You can see why this study freaked me out. Here I've been spending so much energy telling people stress is bad for your health. So this study got me wondering, can changing how you think about stress make you healthier? And here the science says yes. When you change your mind about stress, you can change your body's response to stress. Now, to explain how this works, I want you all to pretend that you are participants in a study designed to stress you out. It's called the social stress test. You come into the laboratory and you're told you have to give a 5-minute impromptu speech on your personal weaknesses to a panel of expert evaluators sitting right in front of you. And to make sure you feel the pressure, there are bright lights and a camera in your face, kind of like this. And the evaluators have been trained to give you discouraging nonverbal feedback, like this. Now that you're sufficiently demoralized, time for part 2, a math test. And unbeknownst to you, the experimenter has been trained to harass you during it. Now, we're going to all do this together. It's going to be fun for me. Okay. I want you all to count backwards from 996 in increments of 7. You're going to do this out loud as fast as you can, starting with 996. Go. Go faster. Faster, please. You're going too slow. Stop, 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 stop. That guy made a mistake. We're going to have to start all over again. You're not very good at this, are you? Okay, so you get the idea. Now, if you were actually in this study, you'd probably be a little stressed out. Your heart might be pounding. You might be breathing faster, maybe breaking out into a sweat. And normally we interpret these physical changes as anxiety or signs that we aren't coping very well with the pressure. But what if you viewed them instead as signs that your body was energized, was preparing you to meet this challenge? Now, that is exactly what participants were told in a study conducted at Harvard University. Before they went through the social stress test, they were taught to rethink their stress response as helpful. That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting more oxygen to your brain. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful for their performance, well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. But the most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict like this. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy and courage. Over a lifetime of stressful experiences, this one biological change could be the difference between a stress-induced heart attack at age 50 and living well into your 90s. And this is really what the new science of stress reveals, that how you think about stress matters. So my goal as a health psychologist has changed. I no longer want to get rid of your stress. I want to make you better at stress. And we just did a little intervention. If you raised your hand and said you'd had a lot of stress in the last year, we could have saved your life. Because hopefully the next time your heart is pounding from stress, you're going to remember this talk and you're going to think to yourself, this is my body helping me rise to this challenge. And when you view stress in that way, your body believes you and your stress response becomes healthier. Now, I said I have over a decade of demonizing stress to redeem myself from. So we are going to do one more intervention. I want to tell you about one of the most underappreciated aspects of the stress response. And the idea is this: stress makes you social. To understand the side of stress, we need to talk about a hormone, oxytocin. And I know oxytocin has already gotten as much hype as a hormone can get. It even has its own cute nickname, the cuddle hormone, because it's released when you hug someone. But this is a very small part of what oxytocin is involved in. Oxytocin is a neurohormone. It fine-tunes your brain's social instincts. It primes you to do things that strengthen close relationships. Oxytocin makes you crave physical contact with your friends and family. It enhances your empathy. It even makes you more willing to help and support the people you care about. Some people have even suggested we should snort oxytocin, like become more compassionate and caring. But here's what most people don't understand about oxytocin. It's a stress hormone. Your pituitary gland pumps this stuff out as part of the stress response. It's as much a part of your stress response as the adrenaline that makes your heart pound. When oxytocin is released in the stress response, it is motivating you to seek support. Your biological stress response is nudging you to tell someone how you feel instead of bottling it up. Your stress response wants to make sure you notice when someone else in your life is struggling so that you can support each other. When life is difficult, your stress response wants you to be surrounded by people who care about you. Okay, so how is knowing this side of stress going to make you healthier? Well, oxytocin doesn't only act on your brain, it also acts on your body. And one of its main roles in your body is to protect your cardiovascular system from the effects of stress. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. It also helps your blood vessels stay relaxed during stress. But my favorite effect on the body is actually on the heart. Your heart has receptors for this hormone. And oxytocin helps heart cells regenerate and heal from any stress-induced damage. This stress hormone strengthens your heart. And the cool thing is that all of these physical benefits of oxytocin are enhanced by social contact and social support. So when you reach out to others under stress, either to seek support or to help someone else, you release more of this hormone, your stress response becomes healthier, and you actually recover faster from stress. I find this amazing that your stress response has a built-in mechanism for stress resilience. And that mechanism is human connection. I want to finish by telling you about one more study. And listen up, because this study could also save a life. This study tracked about 1,000 adults in the United States, and they ranged in age from 34 to 93. And they started the study by asking, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, how much time have you spent helping out friends, neighbors, people in your community? And then they used public records for the next 5 years to find out who died. Okay, so the bad news first. For every major stressful life experience, like financial difficulties or family crisis, that increased the risk of dying by 30%. But, and I hope you are expecting a but by now, but that wasn't true for everyone. People who spent time caring for others showed absolutely no stress-related increase in dying, 0. Caring created resilience. And so we see once again that the harmful effects of stress on your health are not inevitable. How you think and how you act can transform your experience of stress. When you choose to view your stress response as helpful, you create the biology of courage. When you choose to connect with others under stress, you can create resilience. Now, I wouldn't necessarily ask for more stressful experiences in my life, but this science has given me a whole new appreciation for stress. Stress gives us access to our hearts. The compassionate heart that finds joy and meaning in connecting with others. And yes, your pounding physical heart working so hard to give you strength and energy. And when you choose to view stress in this way, you're not just getting better at stress, you're actually making a pretty profound statement. You're saying that you can trust yourself to handle life's challenges. And you're remembering that you don't have to face them alone.
I hope the video gave you a new way to look at stress so you can focus, more on how to make it work for you. It's hard. I've watched this video probably 25 times over the last, 8 or so years. And every time I watch it, I have to remind myself, okay, this is going to be okay. Stress is going to be my friend. But it's a hard one. Anyway, so cognitive distortions then. There's an excellent article on my resource list that goes into greater detail about ways to reframe the situation by changing or modifying the way that we think about it. And the article explains some of the ways that we as humans tend to engage in what psychologists refer to as distorted thinking or cognitive distortions. So we don't have time today for me to elaborate on all of these, but I hope you'll take a look at the article, Dementia, Caregiving, and Controlling Frustration, after the webinar. It's really a good one.
So this last section of the presentation is specifically about self-care. I'm sure you've all heard the analogy comparing oxygen masks on an airplane to self-care. This shows us that we will be useless in providing care for another unless we first put on our own oxygen mask. The same rule applies.
So one of the kindest things that you can do for yourself is to cut yourself some slack, because no one is perfect. And we all experience emotions that we might not want to admit to anyone, let alone ourselves. Honestly, who says out loud something like, boy, I really resent you? But that doesn't mean you're not thinking it or feeling it. If only we were perfect, we would not be feeling any of these troublesome emotions. But we have already established that we are not perfect because we're human. So it's a strength to recognize when your emotions are controlling you rather than you controlling your emotions. Our emotions are messages, and we need to listen to them. They exist for a reason. However negative or painful, our emotions are useful tools for understanding what's happening to us. So even uncomfortable emotions such as anger, guilt, resentment contain important messages. So an article on the resource list, The Emotional Side of Caregiving, does a really good job of explaining all of these emotions and gives you helpful strategies for understanding and dealing with them. It's really important to acknowledge the emotions. Some therapists refer to it as honoring your emotions because they're your emotions. They're part of you. Now, it doesn't mean that you will act on any of the troublesome ones. And like most of us, you'll probably try to hide them. But we need to learn to express them in a safe environment. So what does that look like? Now, the simplest one is writing down your feelings in a journal. You may even want to write down your feelings and throw the paper away or delete the document if you're doing it on your computer. If you have someone in your life whom you trust and you know won't judge you, talk with that person honestly about how you're feeling, or talk to your pets. I think one of the best things you can do, and Gia mentioned this earlier, is to find a support group. These days there are a lot of them online, and they're surprisingly effective. You just need to make sure that the group is run by a reliable source, such as either the Alzheimer's Association or TIPA Snow. Family Caregiver Alliance has really good ones, or we offer them at Hope Hospice. So if you've got any questions about one that you found that you might like to join, or if you may want to join one of them at Hope, just send an email to either Gia or me. Or you can talk with a therapist. They're bound by confidentiality. In my opinion, going to a therapist is one of the best gifts that you can give yourself. Honestly, it saved my sanity when I was caring for my mom.
Self-care is personal. You need to figure out what works for you, what brings you joy and re-energizes you. This list on your screen is just a snapshot of some ideas for you. Really, whatever gives you pleasure and refuels you is where you should focus your self-care energies. I know someone whose favorite form of self-care is to sit outside alone in her garden and write down everything that she's grateful for. Some recent research published in the journal Behavioral Sciences found that one of the very best stress reducers is being creative. Creativity encompasses art, music, dance, crafts, gardening. The author states, when using our bodies, such as in dance, or our hands, as in drawing or coloring, our mind makes space for the activity we're doing in place of the stress we felt before. Asking our brain to focus on creating something puts us in a sort of meditative state, releasing dopamine and slowing our breath. Creative activities at their best elicit a state of flow, a sense of engagement, and letting go without conscious control. So whatever brings you comfort, peace, or rejuvenates you, make it a priority.
So just an example of one of my favorite stress reducers. So it's really a good strategy for reducing that fight or flight response. And it's just breathing. Here's an example of something called square breathing or box breathing. And this has been positively associated with everything from better sleep and improved heart health to reduced anxiety and depression And actually, I'm starting to read articles saying that those of us who practice this type of meditative deep breathing on a regular basis throughout our lives, it actually reduces our chances of getting dementia. I'm always looking for those, and I'll talk more about that in another webinar. So this box breathing or square breathing has 4 steps. The first one is you inhale, and then you hold it, and then you exhale, and then you hold it again, and then you start the pattern all over again. So as the name suggests, the pattern of breathing can be symbolized by a box or a square. So I know, again, it sounds really simple, and it is, but we have to practice it to make ourselves do it several times a day. Really, it can help you get your troublesome stress response under control. It can help you to improve concentration. It can deepen relaxation. I tend to fall back on this whenever I'm experiencing, some stress or some pain or discomfort, and it really does help. The key is for you to practice this for about 5 minutes, several times a day, if you can. I always try to do it as I'm trying to fall asleep at night. Now, there's an article, I believe it's from the Mayo Clinic, that describes this process and gives you a bit more information. I did change one part of it. In step number 3, where it says exhale slowly through your mouth to a count of 4, oftentimes it'll say do it to a count of 6 or 8. I changed it to 4 because it's easier for me to remember 4, 4, and 4, which kind of sounds silly, but that's what works for me. So I'm suggesting it to you. So hopefully if you're not already doing this deep breathing, you'll give it a shot.
Let's look at the rewards of caregiving. Remember, a major cause of burnout is too much stress and too few rewards. Sometimes it's difficult to recognize the good when you're feeling as if you're drowning in an overwhelming situation, but tremendous rewards do exist. This list on your screen is from a book called The Mindful Caregiver. The author surveyed people who'd been family caregivers and asked them to list some of the rewards that they gained from the experience. And here are a few examples. Caregiving can provide you an opportunity to create positive memories as you spend time with your loved one. If you allow yourself to be open to it, caregiving can improve relationships, especially when you realize that there may not be much time left. If the relationship had been rocky, providing care may give you a chance to heal those old wounds. Being patient with one who has dementia is so difficult. It's important to check your own stress and anxiety and impatience at the door. Caregiving can give us a chance to pay back parents or our spouses for the care they may have provided for us throughout our lives. Caring for another person can evoke a type of love and joy that you may not have expected.
So here are a few more rewards of caregiving. And remember, these were voiced by actual caregivers. I can really relate to the first one, creating a role model for the next generation of caregivers. I really hope that our kids were watching as we were caring for their grandparents. Caregiving is a way for us to honor our loved ones. It's important that once our loved one passes, we're not left with regrets about the care we provided. Having peace of mind that you did the best that you could do. And if you've ever lost somebody suddenly, you know how important it is to have time to say all of the things that had gone unsaid. Now with dementia, we have a lot of time. It's called the long goodbye. Changed my priorities, learned what's important. For me, caring for my mom taught me to focus on the importance of quality of life and appreciate the little joys. We mentioned skills in an earlier slide. Caregiving enables us to develop new skills and competencies that most of us never imagined we'd need, in a good way. And when your caregiving journey is over, I hope that all of you can be satisfied that you did a good job and that you're proud of the role that you played in ensuring that your loved ones' last months or years were the best that they could be. And I'm hoping that you're practicing self-care right now so that you'll have many healthy years left to do whatever it is that you want to do.
I know you can read this slide yourself, but I think it's important enough that I want to read it aloud. So I'm going to quickly go through it. I have the right to take care of myself, including resting when I'm tired, eating well, and taking breaks from caregiving when I need to. This is not an act of selfishness. This will enable me to take better care of my loved one. I have the right to seek help from others, even though my loved one may object. I recognize my own endurance and strength and acknowledge that I don't have to do it all by myself. I have the right to socialize, maintain my own interests, and do the things I enjoy. I have the right to acknowledge my feelings of frustration, anger, and depression, and express these feelings in constructive ways. I have the right to disallow any attempt by my loved one, either intentional or not, to manipulate me through guilt, anger, or depression.
I have the right to receive consideration, affection, forgiveness, and acceptance for what I do for my loved one, as long as I offer these qualities in return. I have the right to take pride in what I'm accomplishing and to applaud the courage and creativity it has sometimes taken me to meet the needs of my loved one. And I have the right to protect my individuality and my right to make a life for myself that will sustain me at the time when my loved one no longer needs my full-time help. And this last right is really important. We can get so caught up in our lives as care partners that role becomes our identity. Sometimes to the extent that we ignore or neglect other important aspects of our lives. We tend to put our own lives on hold. I know that I did. And then when our loved one passes, not only do we have this huge void from losing them, but we realize that life has gone on without us, maybe even left us behind. So it's essential that you don't lose your identity and the things that are important to you, because you're going to have a full life to return to after your role as caregiver is over. And you want to be ready for that.